So our next guest has helped solve some of the nation's most high-profile murder cases, and it's all thanks to her passion for plants.
So instead of scrutinising fingerprints or DNA, Professor Patricia Wiltshire uses tiny particles of pollen to track down criminals.
And today she's joining us in the studio to share some of her remarkable crime-fighting stories. Good morning,
Morning, Patricia.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. So you spent 50 years studying plants, which is that paleontology?
Oh, no, that's botany,
Right.
but a certain aspect of botany is palynology, which is the study of pollen and spores and all microscopic things that end up on your microscope slide.
So how did you go from that to working with the police? Where did the connection come from?
Well, I was working as a botanist in archaeology, doing reconstruction of environments, ancient environments.
So what is that? You'd go to a dig and...
Yes, and you take samples, and from that you'll be able to say that there were cornfields there, and they were doing this, and they had cattle, and all about the surroundings. I've done some really spectacular things, actually. But I got a call one day. I was sitting at my microscope, and the telephone went, and it was a very Scottish police officer, and said, Kew Gardens said that you might be able to help us because they can't. So I said, oh, really? And it's a murder. Well, you know, it's quite interesting.
Oh.
I'd never done anything like that,
Yeah.
so I was up for it.
So tell us about your first case that you got hired to do.
Well, it was interesting. It was a triad case, and a man had been murdered. He'd been kidnapped on his wedding day because he had been given money by this triad to for money laundering purposes and buying property. Well, of course, he spent it, and so he had to be punished. So they kidnapped him, and they hog-tied him, and they put his arms and legs behind his back and threw him in the back of a van. But he was a very big man, and his weight collapsed his lungs and he died. So it was an accidental death, really.
Right.
But of course, they panicked. And, oh, what do we do with the body? And so they thought, right, we'll take him to Wales. But they couldn't find Wales. So they ended up going up the A10, and they eventually saw a field, and thinking it was quite remote, well, it was fairly remote, they took the body and dumped it in a ditch. And the
It's all
police...
cheery stuff.
Oh, you didn't want to know the rest of that?
No, I do.
No, I do.
Oh.
Carry on, go on.
Well, the thing was that the police knew that there'd been a van and a car was involved, and they had the car, and the very clever policeman, Paul Dockley, said he mentioned maize pollen because there'd been a crop of maize there. And so they expected me to find maize pollen all over the car.
Yeah.
But of course, I said it's the wrong time of year for us. For a start, and the pollen will have all gone because it's a very fertilised agricultural field. So he said, well, I want you to give it a try. So I'd never done anything like it before, took the car to bits, analysed everything, and lo and behold, a picture came. And it was a field edge next to an ancient hedge. And so I described this, and they said, would you like to come and have a look? So I went and had a look. And it wasn't right and wasn't right, walked along this long, long hedge. All of a sudden, it was right. And I was really shocked because I could what I'd seen in my mind's eye was right in front of me. And so I said, well, that's where the body was. And they said, yes, it was. So that helped with the conviction, I think. But, of course, the police didn't know me very well, and that was my very first case. But there was a conviction.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so excited about how you go about it. I was just going to ask you, how does it work when you first turn up to a case? Do you turn up with the body still there, or... Right, so... Well,
it depends how essential it is. Well, it always, in my view, it's always essential, but sometimes the body is gone. But usually it's what time, when was the body put there, or how long ago did someone walk through here, or we've got a suspect... Can you give us links to this place from his belongings? Or we've got some belongings, where has this person been? Yeah. And that's the sort of thing.
You'll get the call, and then you'll turn up to the crime scene?
Yes, go up, and if the body's there's a lot of information from the body itself and underneath the body.
What are you looking for? Are you looking for something on the body or around the body?
Everything, because I'm an ecologist. Yeah. People go on about plants, but yes, of course, I'm a botanist as well. But you're really looking at the whole environment. And so you're looking at all the creepy crawlies under the body, how the vegetation has been depressed and disturbed, and so on and so on. And you can build up a picture when you're there. Then you have to know and realise what samples you need to take to be able to link someone to that place.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I think the picture in your mind is mind-blowing in the fact that you can actually see the picture before you know anything, and then you go to the place and then that is the picture that was in your mind.
Well, it's only because I've done it for a long time.
Yeah.
And also, I've done an awful lot of field work, you know, tramping through fields and bogs and ditches all my life. And so when you see assemblages of plants, you think, oh, it's that sort of place, it's this sort of place. And you know that this plant will grow here, it won't grow there. And it'll grow with this plant and it won't grow with that plant, and so on. And you can build up the community picture.
And Patricia, you've got a name as the Snot Lady. What does that even mean?
Well, I didn't invent the technique, but it was...
What are we called, everyone?
The Snot Lady.
But it was some... I think they were German doctors were looking at some buried wartime bodies, and they decided to wash out the nasal bones, and I thought this was wonderful. But when I actually saw them do it, I thought, oh, that's more luck than judgment, because they hadn't considered contamination. So I thought, well, this would be good to do on corpses. And so it took a long time to eventually get the best methods, which I won't tell you because it's a daytime programme. But I was able to flush out the upper nasal passages. And when someone is being killed in a place, and if their face is in the ground, they will breathe up tiny particles that most people can't see, but of course microscopically they've got the surface of the ground right up there, so you can visage the place from that.
So you're looking at the body as well as around the body?
Oh yes, oh yes. In the mortuary, you go to the mortuary and with the pathologist there, and I do my bit, and after he's finished, and or when I can fit in.
Yeah. Obviously, two of the most famous cases you've been involved with, and obviously you want to be sensitive about these, the Soham murders and Milly Dowler. What can you tell us about those? Where did you come into that?
Oh, well, with the Soham girls, the police were very clued up. They were ready to go, and they put a team of us together. So well before the girls were found, we all knew what role we would have. And I have to be... It's best for me to be first with the body, so I went into the ditch first to do my bit and sat there for quite a long time. But I was able, while there, to realise what I needed to sample to link Huntley with the place, and it was very successful.
Yeah. And Milly Dowler?
Sorry?
Milly Dowler?
Oh, well, that was quite interesting because that's a very complicated case, and I did things that probably won't come out, but one of the things they wanted to know was how long had she been there? And her skull was lying on the ground. Well, I picked it up and put it down and could tell immediately that it had been there since day one, because she disappeared in March, and this was now September. And if you look under the skull, her skull was on last year's leaf litter. But not only that, all the animals that would normally colonise a body had all gone. It was an ordinary woodman.
She'd been there for a while.
She'd been there for 6 months, and I was able to tell them. And there was all other bones as well. Yeah. I could actually give them a timeline.
Vitally important, isn't it?
Yeah. Patricia, when you go home, do you take any of it home with you, or do you disconnect from what you're doing?
You take your samples home.
But you don't actually think about the person who's lost their life?
Only when, and it's not happened that often, when you go to the home and you see the parents, or you see... Yeah. I remember in the Soham case going to Jessica's home and meeting her mother and seeing her dog and her swing in the... And that hit me hard.
OK. Oh, my goodness. OK, so what are you up to now, then?
Well, I've just finished a cold case that's gone on for a long time. I've submitted 6 reports for that, so hopefully I'm in the Old Bailey for that next February. And I've got 3 other cases on at the moment, one in New Zealand, one in Ireland, and one in England. And
you've got your book out, which is out at the moment, on paperback, Traces, and this is... What's the mainly in everything that you've been talking about?
Well, yes, basically it's a memoir. I say something about my background, a little bit about the science, and then case histories and the stories. They're not dry stories. They are stories.
They're not dry.
The first chapter is really, you'd learn a lot from the first chapter, but I think the rest of it is storytelling.
Thanks, Patricia. I could speak to you all day, couldn't you? So
Really good. Brilliant.